Hello DEFCON Red Team Village. Welcome to my training Offensive Embedded Exploitation, getting your hands dirty with IoT and embedded device. So those who have attended my brief here on day 0 might be related to this talk till recon, and from recon we are deep dive into every subject. Those who have not attended my brief, it's fine. This is the more deeper version of my brief. Here we are going to this training is from zero to hero. Those who are bit familiar with web application testing or network pen testing, those who can easily grasp how they can jump from network pen testing to IoT or embedded device pen testing. Okay, so let's get started with the training. So the agenda will remain same as a brief. So agenda for this talk is first we will have introduction, then preparing arsenal, that is setting up a machine, then reconnaissance, show time, getting hands dirty, and fuzzing, reverse engineering, and exploit development. So this talk is split in a three major sections. First, introduction and setting your machine, getting up. Okay, this will be similar to the brief up to certain level. Then we will move towards recognition of device, how means what are the data we should gather while doing a recon, and then we will have a firmware analysis. So in this section we are going to cover more deeper version of what we cover in a brief. So we will have what to look inside the firmware upon obtaining firmware. This section is quite drilled down. In getting hands dirty, this will be similar to the brief, and here we are going to conduct a dynamic testing on the device which we have targeted here. And fuzzing, reverse engineering, and exploit development. This section is quite heavy. You may need one additional espresso for this, as here we are going to set up everything from scratch to development exploit. Okay, so this is split into total three sections. So let's get started with the introduction. Let me introduce myself. I am Kaustubh Padwad from India, also known as Security Based on Twitter. I have a dozens of exploit listed, which are most of the related to devices and some WordPress and some other stuff. And also, I'm a SYNAC Red Team member. I worked with SYNAC on their cutting edge technologies, and also I'm a speaker. I like to share my knowledge. So now let me introduce IoT in more deeper manner. I have classified IoT in three sections here. Section 1 consists of IoTs which is using at a large scale at industries, like multiple industries, manufacturing industries, government, and a cellular industry, that is internet provider, ISPs, then smart digital citizens, then smart health, agricultural industry, smart building, and uh, smart grid, obviously, and lastly a transportation industry. So let's get into one by one with this. So first get into a transportation industry. So first transport is like vehicle transport. We have a brilliant example of how Tesla is developing their vehicle IoT car, like autopilot, which we used to see in movie. Now it's in real life. So transportation industry is like remotely own the car. Last time I remember Charlie Miller have presented their research on hacking Jeep. So what happened here is like in automotive IoT, the car is get connected to internet and get controls via internet. So this itself is a very big topic. Like car hacking villages are there in our DEFCON only, but this is also a part of IoT that is called automotive IoT. So where they put some kind of embedded chips with some specific command which are totally closed source. Like you have to spend hours and hours and hours to reverse engineer those binary and identify those command which can accept which will get accepted in the car. So in car world, okay, so we have seen that Charlie Miller's video of hacking car. So like transport industry is using heavily uh, IoT products. Now smart building. In the next slide, I have an excellent example of how smart building can be implemented as an IoT product. Agricultural industry. One of my friend himself have developed one technology stack with one Raspberry Pi only, that automating water supply to his plants, which is at his home and which is at his farmhouse. So what happened is, like, he took one sensor which sensed the soil, second sensor who sensed the temperature, third sensor who sensed the wind, uh, surrounding wind, and this all data is sent to the his Raspberry Pi. And once Raspberry Pi finds eligible that soil is dry and temperature is high and plants need a water, it triggers a switch to turn on the water supply to his farm. So isn't it an excellent example of agriculture or smart agriculture or smart farming? Health is a critical aspect. We are going to cover it here also. But what different here is, like, in industry is like they are going to in some companies are developing smart ambulance. You might be thinking what the smart ambulance is. Like, once the patient is inside the ambulance, this some sensors will get connected to his body, and the required data by doctor will be get triggered from those sensors, like a blood pressure, hemoglobin level, and blood level inside, means inside the blood level, then his temperature, then his heartbeat. This all data will send immediately to the doctor, so that patient don't need to wait till he arrives in a hospital, and doctor can start diagnose remotely. So doctor will start diagnosis immediately, so that if there is a critical case where urgent treatment is needed, all you need is that IoT ambulance. Once the ambulance reaches there, it gets connected to human body, and every data that requires by doctor will received by a doctor, and according to that, doctor can start immediate treatment. So health industry is medical IoT is getting too much serious in nowadays. And digital citizen, as we are digital, like everything we have digital nowadays. We I hardly relate. I hardly remember that we are carrying old style wallets or old style watch. Nothing, like everything is smart. Everything is fit in the pocket. Like we have smart fitness trackers, smart wears, then smart bands. Everything we have. The mobility Wi-Fi becomes the very big aspect in when it comes to IoT, because these services are provided by ISPs. In mobility, there are two types of IoT bands are there. One is narrow band and second is LTE M band. When you have a need to send a just bit like O or C, like open or close kind of stuff, then you need where you don't need too much data to be sent to over the internet. You can use those small devices which will send data to the user. So which will send data to the platform, and those data will transport over NIDD protocol, narrowband data, most of the time. So that falls under SS7 security. And smart government. I have an other example in next slide regarding smart government and smart manufacturing industry. So manufacturing industries needs to take care of multiple aspects that divide. If it is manufacturing some device, then that device should not be break. The proper QA testing should be done of that device, and to improve the efficiency and product quality, these guys are nowadays manufacturing using smart technologies. In when manufacturing industry manufactures something, obviously they have to do some logistic, right? So for that logistic also, IoT devices are in use. So like one fine example here is like any product which is getting melt, for example ice cream, that if you open the ice cream, ice cream carrying truck, it will start melting, right? When it comes to room temperature, it start melting. Or let's say if there is a fuel carrying vehicle like oil or something, if that truck gets open or someone may tamper with that truck, that could be a big issue, right, for everyone. So to avoid that, there are some devices which will immediate small devices, very small devices, which will trigger a data using MQTT protocol, and it sends to the IoT platform that this truck was door of this truck was open at this time, and that sends to the IoT platform, and IoT platform will generate an SMS alert and send it to the respective owner of that your vehicle has been tampered, or at that moment he can immediately call and get to know that why you opened my truck or why this tampering happens, to detect such kind of tampers, to monitor the fuel level, like there are fuel theft happens, to monitor the fuel level. If fuel level suddenly reduce up to certain limit, it will send you alert. And cars are getting tracked, like to implement SOS button, emergency button. Let's say if some driver is misbehaving with some taxi driver is misbehaving with the passenger, then they can suddenly push the button which will send the current location of that vehicle to the nearest police station using satellite. So many things, like you name it, and IoT is happening. IoT is too much, like too emerging field nowadays, and in every industries IoT is in use. So this we look about industrial IoT. Now this part, I don't know how visible it is, but this part is super critical. Like this equipments here, the loss of in industry grade IoT, the loss is also huge, but not a life risk. But here in these devices, like here are insulin pumps and a pacemaker. Let's assume that these two devices, like if you want to give some insulin shot to your loved ones, and if it's a small kid and she is going to school and she is not able to take her own care, or let's say there is a grandparents who is not able to take a proper insulin on time. So what happened is, like at that time you can use those insulin pumps. So these insulin pumps are, let's say you are using some apps to give a insulin shot to this guy. That means these pumps are getting controlled from somewhere, right? That means these pumps as having remote access. So now let's assume that if hacker get this access, how critical it would be. Pacemakers are a major part of life, right? Of patient life. So these devices are inside the body and it is controlling our essential things, like heartbeat is the most essential thing of human being, right? So these are the wireless implantable medical devices, which are really critical aspects of IoT testing. Now, others, like apart from industry and human, animals are also using IoT. So like one company, they are developing a belt which will be on a neck of a cow, and that belt will that belt will try to understand and analyze the uh, animal or your pet, and based on some behavior of that pet, it will generate an alert and send it to the owner of pet. Like if say you have a good dog at your home, you put a that IoT belt on his neck, and now if he lost somewhere, so like those pets generate some particular events. So like they might be look here and there, they might be run from here and there, and based on that pattern, that smart belt will generate an alert and send it sends to the platform, and based on the alert, platform will send you an SMS that your pet is lost, and his location is this. Or let's say you are working a 9 to 5 in office, and suddenly your pets develop a temperature. So if the particular threshold is hit, that IoT belt will send you an alert that your pet is having fever. So kind of stuff. So uh, we can track our cattle with this, like locations and all. So everything. So we can take with the power of IoT, we can take covers of everything, right? Now, as I told you, we can implement a smart building. So here is a small example of how smart building can be implemented.
天猫精灵，关闭窗帘。
正在关闭窗帘。
天猫精灵，打开电视。天猫精灵，
主人，你说。
我需要一瓶水。
好的，服务员会尽快送来饮用水。机器人正在执行配送任务中，进入电梯。
The self-check-in machine, like the guest mobile check-in, like the robot service and homogeneous voice butler. The purpose of this kind of service and technology is to improve the efficiency of the service and the consistency of the service quality.
您可以取出物品了。
Surely you like to go there and check in to see how they have implemented such a smart stuff, right? And now, as I told you, that smart government, how can it be a smart government? Means how can IoT will be utilized as a from the government perspective? So there is a thing that your tube light or your street light may costing you around $5 per month. So that is $60 per month. You have hundreds of tube light inside the city, right? So approximately a $600 per month for 100 lights, right? As they are running 24 hours, that's why they cost you a lot. Now the company called Quicktel have developed one small NB IoT, narrowband IoT module. They called it they named that model as a BC95G or BG95G or something. They implemented that module in a tube light, street light. So what happened if when the vehicle will come, then only the light will get start, and when the vehicle is passed, when no one is there, the light will get turned on. Here is a small brief of it. As you can see, no one is there, all lights are off.
全开。
As you can see, the vehicle is passing, all lights are turned on, right? This can save you lots and lots of electricity, right? This will save your electricity also, and this will save your billing cost also to the electricity. So government can implement this kind of stuff, means smart IoT stuff, at a very large scale than even we can imagine, right? So as the IoT is really powerful, it's really great and it's really powerful. With a great power, great responsibilities do come, right? When I was a kid, I used to hear the stories of witchcraft and black magic, that people used to contact that witchcraft man or black magic guy, and they used to give a contract to kill someone, and that guy remotely manages to kill someone. I don't know whether this is a fact or not, whether this is true or not, but yes, I don't believe on witchcraft, but if you look at IoT, this is possible. Here is a great news. Medical pumps and pacemaker threat as a doctor simulated hacked overdose. Now, if I set your heartbeat as a 3000 beats per minute, who can save you from getting cardiac arrest? No one, right? immediately you will get a heart attack and you can die in a second. Similarly, if you need a 10 ml insulin in your body, and if I give you 100 ml insulin, and that to a 10 shot of 100 ml insulin, no one can save you, right? So this is a remote killing procedure. So what I'm trying to convey here is the device is implantable inside the human body. So the security of those devices, if at all it is remotely operatable, then should be considered as very high level. Now we are having a trend of having smart things like smart home, like Alexa, turn on the lights, it turn on the light. Alexa, turn off the light, it turns off the light. We are having a spy robot at home to take care of our loved ones. Like if you're working and nobody stays at home to take care of your kid, you brought one smart robot. That robot is taking care. That robot is helping you for spying across the home. Now, hacker utilize the same robot to spy you. Here is a news. Hacker breaks into a smart home, play inappropriate music, and communicate with resident via camera. So for our generation, it is okay. Like we are familiar with this thing. But for kids, it's super risky. For grandparents, it is again super risky. They might get scared if someone is sitting at you on chair and somebody shouts, "Hey, wake up from the chair or get up from the chair." They might get scary that who is spying us, right? It's a really and critical aspect to compromise a smart home and enter inside the home. This one is a industry level IoT attack. It calls OMG. Mirabai botnet turns IoT device into a proxy server. So Mirai is one of the biggest attack happens in IoT industry, and if you have not gone through it, you must go through it. I feel always like somebody is listening. So same thing. Again, you buy a surveillance system, that surveillance system turns into a spy system. Why? Because lack of security testing. I believe like a product review, there should be a security review of the product also. Like how this product is secure. Is it easy? Is it good that I should take this to the home? No comments here. Ex Amazon employee says he turned off the Alexa in his private moment. Maybe spy again. And FDA recalls nearly half of million pacemakers over hacking fears. Just I said that if you are able to remotely control these pacemakers, you can kill anyone, right? This is most critical aspect. So my case study for this is not that which is a life risk related or something. This is about this decent looking IP phone. So the topic is, can this decent looking IP phone turns into a botnet? So what do you think, guys? Can we do it? Those who attended the brief, they might know. And why IP phone? Why I choose a target as IP phone? Because every company have IP phone. Every corporate employee have access to their IP phone. So the IP phone is planted in such a way that ISP's internet coming to the IP phone. Then IP phones, there is one LAN cable. It is connected to your PC, and that will give network to your PC, LAN network. Most of the time, LAN network and IoT network are same. That means you can access your IP phone from your LAN network, right? Now, first thing we ensure that we have access to the IP phone using LAN network, right? Now, remaining story, our training is based on it. Okay. Now, let's assume that a large company, large corporate, having 40,000 to 50,000 IP phones easily, right? In my company itself, there are 40,000 plus IP phones. Generally, these guys purchased IP phone from one vendor. Like if there is a Cisco, then you will see every IP phone is having Cisco network. I don't know the reason, but to maintain the network or to maintain to design the network, it will be a useful, right? So now uh, one company is having 50,000 IP phone, assuming that the second company also let's say a second large corporate is also having a 50,000 IP phone. So if you manages to hack one IP phone remotely, then you can turn those 1 lakh IP phone as your bots. Isn't it a critical? And in city like a Mumbai, I believe you find at least 1 crore IP phone of unique brand, of same brand. At least 1 crore. As Mumbai is a corporate hub, or any in corporate hub, you will find 1 lakh IP phone, 1 crore IP phone, right? And let's assume that 5 major cities of India like Hyderabad, Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, and Mumbai. This and Pune also. The 6 cities having 6 crore unique IP phone. Let's a wild guess. Now let's assume if this 6 major cities, IP phone of these 6 major cities get compromised with your sophisticated attack against targeted IP phone. What do you think? If you instruct those bots to fire 10 curl requests each to any big server, any big service provider company from Amazon, Flipkart, Google, or Facebook, you think 6 crore into 10 requests per second, that is 60 crore requests per second. You think how long these servers can hold the capacity? And the also major aspect is it is coming from random sources. So like it's not that block one IP and you will end up. You have to block from 6 crore IP phones. Let's have a wild guess. At least you have a 60 lakhs ISPs or 60 lakh IP address from where the request is coming, right? So you have to block those all 60 lakhs IP, right? And it's a legitimate HTTP request. So one cannot just block a protocol. So this is a case study. So now we will see how can we achieve it. But before we start, we need to set up our machine. So how can we set up our machine? Means what are the minimum requirement to get started with the IoT? We need the first important thing is a good operating system. And I believe Linux is the best operating system for pen testing IoT device. Why? Number one, it have a seamless integration with QEMU, and with QEMU you can emulate any binary like MIPS binary you can emulate, ARM binary you can emulate. So if you want to test this, you need a simulator, right? You can't buy all the devices. Like you may have access to the 50 firmwares, but you may not have access to the 50 devices. So in that case, you have to emulate the firmware. So Linux have a smooth access. Secondly, Linux provide the lowest level access to the operating system. So if it's not a if you connected a device to Windows, it which is not in of which the drivers is not listed, Windows will say unknown device, and that device will remain unknown till the time you find a correct driver. But in case of Linux, when you connect any kind of device, any unknown device, Linux will at least give you something, like something as in maybe a vendor ID, maybe a manufacturer, maybe a device type. You will get something, and accordingly you can find your way for further testing. And also Linux have a huge community support. So let's say you buy some nasty product which is not listed somewhere, you just connect it to Debian, full-fledged Debian, you may end up getting somewhere their drivers, software to operate. So massive community support is having to the Linux. And also the only operating system where you will find, which you can find everywhere, from routers to a POS machine. Most of these devices are Linux devices and some RTOS devices. So understanding a Linux is too much important to understand IoT devices, or at least you need a knowledge of file system. If you have a knowledge of file system, then Linux file system, then it makes easier to understand the IoT devices. Now, JTagulator. the de facto standard for factory testing. When you have to do a QA of device, they will do it using JTAG, RxTX, JTAG, and test clock machine. With that, they will do it. Most of the device, some of the device don't have any interface to interact with. There is no USB port, there is no LAN port, there is no WAN port, there is no GPIO pins, or there is no UART pins. But on most of the device, you will find JTAG port because it's a de facto standard for factory testing. And to perform a complete test of device, whether the functionality of device is working or not, JTAG port is present. And in some cases, like where you don't have access to anything of device, it's a complete black box approach. You may end up with finding the pins with JTAGulator and dumping the core data. Core data means dumping the firmware of device, and with firmware we can do lots of things which we are going to cover in next slides. And this is the API model. As I told you in previous slide, there is a cattle tracker are building. So what these devices do is like they host one server inside your cattle, which is having a wide range of, let's say, 10 to 50, 5 to 10 meters, and they put a sensor like a Bluetooth sensor or some other sensors, Zigbee or Z-Wave data, to test that the IoT brings you a wireless inside you. So most of the IoT devices are majorly focused on wireless stuff. So that devices are running on protocols called Zigbee or a Z-Wave, and to test those protocols we need one tool that is called API Mote tool. With API Mote you can perform a Zigbee packet replay attack, Zigbee packet injection attack, and many attacks are there which you can do with the API Mote. And lastly, we need a connectors. Yes, trust me, connectors are the life. Connectors are going to help you everywhere, wherever you're going to test the IoT device. So we need at least extra one WAN card, extra one LAN card, extra one Bluetooth adapter, and apart from this we need a screwdriver set to open any device. Also there is one smart device called Shkira. We need it to connect our GPIO pins, our UART pins, our JTAG pins. All this can get connected with the Shkira. So instead of purchasing multiple devices for multiple like UART to USB converter, then GPIO to USB converter, you can simply buy one Shkira, which will ease your all tasks. And lastly, to hack radio frequencies, we need a hack RF. Okay. So these are the things that with which we can get started. And for advanced setup, you can build whatever you want, right? You can build such kind of lab. I got it somewhere from Black Hat Live. So the more devices will come, more things, like more chips you are going to build, and more connectors you are going to get, like from connecting device to a PCB, and that PCB will get your UART port, and that UART to USB connector. So this kind of connector you will need it till the means as per need. So as per need you can build those stuff. So there is no restriction for making advanced lab. As the connector will keeps coming in, as the new devices will keeps coming in, you can start building your tools. Sometimes you one day you will become more successful that you will start building your own connector. Okay, if you keep journey, if you continue the journey of IoT. Okay, now this is all about a hardware requirement. Now what are the software that we need for performing a pen test? Is it open source? Is it a closed source? Is it paid? Is it a free? So the answer is most of the software that we need are open source. Here is the list of tools which we generally require. I call this as a weapon. If you are not from India, this is a weapon of mother. So our mother used to hit us with this uh, weapons. Okay. So the weapon, the first and most important weapon for our IoT pen testing is a binwalk. So binwalk is a tool of binwalk is the greatest tool wrote by Mr. Craig Hefner, known as a DevTTYS0. So this is one of the greatest tool that we need to perform firmware analysis. So what is a firmware that we are going to cover? So basically, firmware is a file which is installed inside the device. It contains all the configuration of embedded device. Okay. So to extract those files and to extract that firmware file, we need a binwalk. Without binwalk, IoT pen testing is like not possible at all. So binwalk contains of multiple file system. Binwalk is a multi-file system reader, we can say. Like a binwalk contains a in Windows you have seen the FAT32, FAT and NTFS of file system. In Linux we see ext1234 operating file system. Sometimes Razor FS, like that's what we generally see. Okay, but in embedded system the file system are completely different than the file system are present in our Windows and Linux. So this contains a UBI file system, this contains a CramFS file system, this contains a SquashFS file system, this contains UB reader we go, SquashFS, CramFS it contains a YZFS or something, YFS file system. So multiple, there is a list of 20 to 30 file system that are generally used in a embedded system. So binwalk is a what we say, it's a universal tool. So what it does a signature analysis to identify which file system it is, the firmware is, and once it identifies the file type, it runs that particular file system reader. It runs that particular file system reader and extract the required data from the firmware file. Okay. The second most important tool is a firmware. So let's say you have a firmware, but you don't have a device. Now what? So like a virtual machine, VirtualBox does not support embedded file system running. So one guy called CCDC on GitHub have developed a complete firmware emulation suite. It's called a Firmware. So Firmware is a combination of multiple open source tools. Like it contains a QEMU, it contains an open source kernel, it contains a kernel for MIPS, it contains a kernel for ARM, for MIPS little ADN, MIPS big ADN. For every device, for every architecture, there is a kernel and there is a kernel and initramfs also available. Then uh, apart from that, it contains a binwalk to extract the file system, and then they are using Postgres to keep the archive of firmware inside to maintain the database of firmware. The only problem with the Firmware is still now what I feel is Firmware is not good at networking end. Like to build a network, it most of the time it fails. But it's not that tool's fault. That it's an open source tool. You have to deep dive into it and you can get it up and running. So basically it used a QEMU networking model. So if you understand the QEMU networking, then you may like it's like first it extract the firmware, then it makes a file system with their kernel and their initramfs, then it saves the file system as a um, uh, in database. Then it creates a tar of that database, tar of that file system. Then it creates a squashfs image of that file system. Once the squashfs image is created, it reads the architecture by analyzing the busybox binary, that which architecture it is. For example, if it's a MIPS little ADN, then it loads the MIPS little ADN kernel and initramfs and QEMU MIPS EL binary, and it creates your virtual machine with a networking stack. So Firmware is a mixture of multiple tools, and you can use it for emulating. It's a really great tool till now what I used. Burp suit is our loved ones, like everyone knows here, hopefully, or if not, then burp suit is a proxy tool through which you can intercept a web request, right? So it's a proxy tool, and to automate the stuff, we need our Python. With the help of Python, you can automate most of the stuff that we are doing on regular basis. And lastly, the heart of offensive embedded testing is Radare Pro. Sorry, Radare 2, no, IDA Pro. So IDA is the great tool for reverse engineering. Those who are familiar with IDA, very good. Those who are not, so IDA is a binary reverse engineering tool with which you can open lots of secrets which are hidden or which are undocumented from you. You can easily identify. So IDA, it's not necessary that IDA Pro should be only used. There are other tools like Radare, and second tool is like NSA Ghidra. It also offers a nice GUI. It's a cross-platform, like it's in Java, so you can run it on Windows, on Linux also. And IDA works great on Windows. I have not used IDA on Linux. So these are the weapons. These are the mandatory weapons which we need for testing embedded system. Okay. So now once you have set up everything, the first thing is recognition, right? Information gathering is the key of successful pen test. Same applies to here. The more you get information, the more you come up with a knowledge of product. So here we have split the recon section into two parts. One is active recon, second is a passive recon. So first we will have a look at a passive recon, and then we will have a look at a active recon. So in passive recon, these products, when these products are a global seller, they have to register that their products with a FCC ID. With every device, there is a unique FCC ID assigned to the device, and that you can look up on backside of the device. So generally, it is on the device itself. You may see CE written something, and there below FCC ID equal to this. So why we need to read about a FCC ID? There was an incident which happened with us, that there was a IP phone only. That vendor was fighting with us. That vendor was saying that this device don't have Wi-Fi. We have read the specification of device, and in that they have clearly mentioned that there is a Broadcom wireless chip installed inside the device. Post that, we have opened that device and demonstrated them that there is a chip of Broadcom wireless adapter. Still, he was denying that no, this is not a Broadcom chip. This is something different. Then we customize their firmware, as we perform mostly a white box testing. So we customize their firmware, and once we insert the module which loads the Wi-Fi driver, and we have installed the appropriate Wi-Fi driver for that device, and we get up running, and then told that vendor that, see, your device have Wi-Fi, and finally he agrees, and he lies for some reason, I don't know. So FCC ID is a document where you will find all the specification of the device. Okay. Second, first is FCC ID. Second, every IC details is available online. So you may buy one magnifying glass. I don't have right now with me, and you should open the device PCB and you should look for the ICs, that what ICs is installed. And about regarding that IC identifier, you can search online what did IC is. Then you can draw a PCB board and you try to connect the dots on PCB, so that you get a better understanding of PCB of the device, right? So also with this, you should ask more and more and more and more and more documentation. So like you should ask for the product data sheet, you should ask for the user manual, you should ask if they are maintaining a security document, you should ask for the algorithms that are used inside the device. You should ask for the debugging document. You should ask for the troubleshooting document of the device. You should ask for the user manual we cover, right? magic number generation algorithms which is used inside the device. So as much as the document, you should be never satisfied when you are asking for the document. You should always keep asking, like, give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more, give me more. So I'll tell you why we need, why the documentation is important. So here is the thing. As you can see in this document, they have listed down the protocols. What are the protocols that are in use? Here you can see this device support SIP version 2. That means you can, if you are able to successfully MITM in between the communication of IP phone with the SIP server, and if you are MITM in between, and if you are able to identify the correct codec, then you might be able to listen a conversation happening over a IP phone. And similarly, this device doesn't support a SRTP. That means this device, as the protocol document said, that since this device support only RTP, that means you can also, if it's a RTP communication, you can do MITM and you can listen what switching is going on, right? So this document suggests us that this supports only SNMP v2, right? It's not a vulnerability itself, but we come to know that we can interact with device using SNMP also. Also, you might seen this is for some of this, you guys might have seen this for first time. So this protocol is a TR069 protocol, which is used to reconfigure the device, which is used to configure the device. This is called a technical report 069. With this, with the ACS server is something new to you, might be. So ACS server, with ACS server, you can communicate to device over TR069 protocol to reconfigure the device. So you can configure each and every aspect of device with a TR069. Even you can push a firmware upgrade with this. Now, a user manual. These are the basic documents which we are talking about now. A user manual suggests us that device have a upgradable firmware, means you can easily upgrade the firmware. Web management interface. So 8443 running, device have web interface. So our IP phone have a web interface. Now device have password management. So device can make a accountable password. Device have a remote and local syslog support. 514 must be open. Auto provisioning of device using TFTP, HTTP and HTTPS. Then SNTP time synchronization, that's okay. Multi-user level. So if some smart guy managed to change the password of his device from admin to admin 123, still there are accounts like support, tech, user, agent kind of account which you can access with the default credential. Like user you can log in, tech you can log in, support you can log in. So this kind of account exists in real life in device testing. So this should be your slogan. I want more, I want more, I want more. And default PC communication type is bridge. Default username for admin mode is admin, great. Default username for user mode is user. Default password for web is null. What? So they design a device, they put a web interface on it, they created users, but they forgot to set the password. Who cares, right? Till now, most of the guys who are watching this stream might not be aware that their IP phone got a web interface, right? So if we don't know that there is a web interface exists, then who cares about the web credentials, right? But hackers cares about this. So default password for web is null and default web login port. So you don't need to perform nmap also. Like to access the web interface, you can just connect to IP phone with 8080 port and you will get the connection. I heard that you like algorithms, so I use an algorithm to pick an algorithm to generate an algorithm. So why algorithm is important? Why reviewing algorithm is the most critical part. Algorithms are used for two purposes in device generally. One is to generate a magic number and second is to generate a password. So let's say vendor X decide to manufacture the Wi-Fi router, right? Now they have produced 1 crore to 2 crore Wi-Fi router, and as per minimum requirement, each Wi-Fi router should have unique Wi-Fi password, right? Otherwise, if you give a common password for across the vendor, then anyone can connect to the Wi-Fi router, right, with a common password. So generally, these guys have a random password for each router. So how what do you think how they are managing it? Like to maintain the data of hundreds and crores and tens of crores of router, that the password for this Wi-Fi is this. It's a hectic task, right? So what these guys do? These guys writes an algorithm to generate a password. Let's say last 4 digit of MAC address plus date and time. Last 4 digit of MAC address plus 2 digit of serial number plus time, or sometimes last 4 digit of MAC address plus time as a random seed, and last 4 digit and uh, last 4 digit of serial number, or MAC address and time as a seed to create a password. So these are the simple algorithms. And why reviewing this algorithm is important? Because if the algorithm is weak, then all your product security is waste. Like if I use a MMDD as a Wi-Fi password for a device, then anyone can connect with MMDD to my password to my router, right? In default state, I'm talking about. Even if you are using time as a SRAN, current time as a random seed, and you are using MAC address as a input, and you're doing a rand on MAC address and generating a password, still it's an easy way. Like you can sniff a MAC address by capturing beacon. You perform a SRAN on it or a RAN on it, and then you get a Wi-Fi password, right? So these are some weak algorithms are in use which should be take care. Now the magic number. What is magic number? In device, there are some super interfaces which are not accessible for everyone. Like for few device there is an engineer page, few device have a tech support page, few device have a debug page, few device have a debug mode itself. But to enter into that debug mode, there are a task. Like there was one device which I tested. For to enter in the debug mode, you have to press a reset button 7 times. Then only it will enter into a debug mode. And at debug mode, you get a shell of the device. That's why it is important. Some devices having a slash tech support page, tech support.html, slash superuser.html, slash some random name, like I don't even remember that name, .html. But to enter that page, you need to enter some magic password, and that magic password was again generated by algorithm. So they run an algorithm on, like I explained earlier, and it will create a string. That string they use as a magic number to access those devices. Okay. So these are the checklist mostly which we needs to take care while doing a passive recognition of the device. Now let's come back and look at the active recognition. First and most important thing is to know your device. So what are some common things that you know about a device? Like as this, let's assume this as an IP phone as your target. What are the common things? Like a classic and network connection is like it must have a LAN port. It might have a wireless. It might have a Bluetooth. It might be get managed with a TR69. It might have SNMP. It might have SSH. It might have a telnet. It might have a web interface. So these 8 techniques we can guess from this phone, that this phone may have these 8 techniques. Apart, these connection modules work almost everywhere with most of the devices, which are enterprise devices or let's say home devices. This kind of techniques work, but there are few more protocols that are supported only in a IoT. Like, have you heard about NIDD? The NB IoT devices works on NIDD. So it's impossible to track. It is impossible to capture the communication until unless you break a SS7. Second, ADB interface. Most of you might be knowing it, and that nowadays devices are coming with Android. So ADB is also a good entry point for us. Third, do you guys have a cable setup box, which we say a classic cable TV setup box? So if you have that setup box, you might want to take a look. There is a USB stick connected to it. So why that USB stick is there? Because USB stick is a way to interact with device. So once you plugged in that USB stick there, and with some specific files, it turns that device into a debug mode. Or the purpose of that is to use that USB stick as a firmware upgrade. But with firmware upgrade, you can also trick that as a turning the device into debug mode. So there are ways. Apart from USB stick, SD card is also there. So like same like USB, you can use SD card. Some protocols like Zigbee, Z-Wave are used widely in IoT. And lastly, a Bluetooth energy attack. Also, apart from this, some devices have very close source ways to access that device. Like as I told you in connector section, there was one device. It was nothing but nothing was there. It was just a modem and one MCU. That MCU was doing some operation based on the JTAG input. So not JTAG, GPIO pins. So once pin sends an input to MCU, MCU used to perform some operation and send data to the modem, and that modem was sending data to the platform, IoT platform. So to interact with that device, we finally gave up and we asked vendor that, hey, can you tell us that how can you interact with device? So he told us that there is one chip. On that chip, you have to put that device, and then it connects. It creates a COM interface with a UART. So now UART to chip, USB to UART, UART to chip, and chip to that device. So there was a modem debug interface was there. Using that pins, you are able to reconfigure the modem and MCU. That was pure IoT device which we have tested last time, and so these are the specific things that we need to take care on the recon section. Now in active recon itself, you don't have to stop with the port scan only. Like in network pen test, we generally perform a subdomain enumeration and full port scan and directory brute forcing and file brute forcing kind of stuff. Here in recognition, there are a few other aspects that needs to be taken care. One, while understanding the device, we have to identify which architecture this device is using, whether it's a ARM, whether it's a MIPS EL, or MIPS Big ADN, or ARM, which version of ARM it is using. We can identify that with a version of BusyBox that device is using. In the embedded device, due to lack of space, these all guys mostly use a BusyBox as a kernel, as a initrd, as a list of binaries. So BusyBox is a multi-call binary, which basically it describes in easiest way. It's a multi-call binary. It contains lots of tools in one BusyBox only. Some vendors customize the BusyBox and remove some of the files, which we are going to talk in further section. So based on the BusyBox, we can identify which architecture of devices, and also we can read some FCCID stuff or document review. Based on it, we can identify. Now second aspect is to identify underlying OS. So some devices might show you some UI only, web application, but you have to identify what that device is, like underlying it's an Android, or it's a Linux, or it's RTOS, or some other operating system. So once you are able to identify that operating system, you can map your device properly and you can perform directional you will get a proper direction for testing. Also, identifying as we discussed, we have to identify the proper interface to interact with device, and then we can act accordingly. One thing is, like, whenever you get a LAN port or WAN port, means you get a TCP connection, you should always run a nmap on all ports. Why? Here is the thing that I got a remote code execution on this 1380 port, and denial of service, like distribution denial of service on 4046 and 41565 port. So like I was able to remotely crash this device, and I was able to execute a code on this device, and this was an end user device. So end user device means uh, like 70 to 80,000 devices was live. So if I just fire a blindly payload that connect to 1380 and install listener netcat listener, I may get those many bots on public network, and also it was listening on a public interface. So that's how it becomes critical. Now, show time. So here we are done with our first section. Now we are having a firmware analysis section in show time. Now let's get started with the show time. In this section, we are going to cover a firmware analysis of the device. So agenda for this section is identifying what is the firmware, obtaining firmware, unpacking firmware, and finding vulnerabilities inside the firmware. So basically what to look inside the firmware. So what is firmware? Firmware is a file which contains three major sections. One is a file system, second kernel, and third bootloader. So a file containing these three sections is called as a firmware. So there are majorly two types of firmware available in the market. One is a full firmware which contains a file system, kernel, and bootloader, and second there is a delta of the firmware. So what happens is, like, your firmware of, let's say I'm using a Samsung phone, the firmware for Samsung phone is around 1.5 GB. Now there was a malfunction, like camera is not opening, or upon opening the camera it is getting crashed. So now Samsung have identified this problem, and they want to ship a new firmware to your phone. And device in market are millions of device, right? So they cannot just recall all the device and flash with the new firmware. So what they do, sending 1.3 GB over internet is also a ridiculous task. So what they do is they just identify that difference and send that difference to your device. So that difference may be in a KB or maximum in a MB. It is called a delta of the firmware, which contain the difference from your existing firmware to new firmware. And that delta is also secure. Like one delta cannot be set in other device, or it have a authentication mechanism. It have a keys with which device is signed. Okay. Now, what are the ways to obtain the firmware? The most legitimate and easiest way is to download the firmware from their website, if they are providing. So if you visit any router website or product website, they sometimes offer you a firmware for upgrading your local device. Okay, so that is the most easiest way. Second is obtaining from update. Whenever you get a system update on your Android phone, you just set up a Wi-Fi MITM bridge, like creating one access point, and you can check for update from there. And as you check for update, if the firmware update is available, click on download and keep a capture on that bridge. So you can capture that firmware using firmware update. Next, extracting from the device. As I told you, we are using a JTAG, where there is no way to interact the device with JTAG. With the JTAG connection, you can also dump the complete firmware from the device. And Google Docs always win. You can search for index of or FTP of the product name. You may get a firmware. And analyzing device traffic. So what this is, analyzing device traffic? Sometimes you may wake up and see your phone got restarted without any power issue or without any issue. So what happened? The vendors most of the time sends a silent firmware upgrade. So it like if there is a changes which needs to be applied on device on priority, they shoot the firmware at night time, when generally when you are sleeping. At that time they send a firmware upgrade, and sometimes if there is a critical update, device needs to get restarted. That's why your phone, you might found your phone is getting restarted for no reason. So there is a silent firmware upgrade. So what you can do is, like at my home I have set up an interception server, so every traffic is get captured there. So if there is any firmware upgrade, I used to get from that interception server. So analyzing device traffic is also a one way where you can obtain the firmware. Now you have a firmware. Now what? You have to don't you don't have to run a binvoc-me on the firmware file. That is the most inappropriate way to approach the firmware. So what you can do is first perform an entropy analysis to identify whether firmware is encrypted or not. If the firmware is encrypted, then if the firmware is encrypted and if you run a binvoc-me, it will create a huge garbage of GBs and TBs and it will fill your hard drive. It happens to me, that's why. So first thing you should do is to identify whether the firmware is encrypted or not. As here you can see, the line is complete from one, and only here there is a little drop. If there is a one line is at one level, that means the firmware is completely encrypted. And these drops, this line drops suggest that this portion of the firmware is not encrypted. So what you can do in such a case, you can run a tool called DD. Those who are using Linux might be familiar with the DD. Those who are not, then DD is the lowest level this data analysis tool, or like data extraction tool. So with the DD, you run a DD on the specific offset of the firmware, and you can extract those data. So what happened is, like, once I was lucky enough to get a private key for decoding firmware, that when I was able to extract, when I extract this data, small data, and once I was lucky using hexdump, I got a password to extract the firmware inside the hexdump. So it was a OpenSSL encrypted firmware, but I don't know how they forgot a password inside that. And later you can perform a signature analysis. So binvoc provides a signature analysis feature with which you can identify which file system is inside the device based on it. So binvoc-e is used to generate this entropy chart, what you can see here. Now you got a firmware. Now what? So you manage to get the firmware, you manage to extract the firmware. Like we are having, we generally perform a white box testing because we have a limited time to give a sign off to the device. So like we receive a device, we have to share the result of security status of the device within 10 to 15 days. So we generally prefer a white box approach. So if the firmware is encrypted, we ask the vendor to provide us a decrypted firmware for security purpose, and all the precautions like non-disclosure agreement are in place. So assessment is a proper. So vendors most of the time they share the firmware. Now what to look inside the firmware? So first thing is sbin/busybox. You should look for the busybox binary, and when you run a busybox binary, you will come to know that which architecture of this device is using. Second, a shadow file and passability file to identify what are the accounts are there inside the device. Third, you should look for the document root. So document root is the basically uh, source code for the web application of the device, where you from where you can find the entry point to the device via via identifying vulnerabilities like code injection vulnerabilities. It's easy to perform a source code review on document root of the device. It's not so huge. Third, you can take a look at the application binary. As I told you, embedded is like we have very small world. So in that small area, we have to fit all the application logic, all the application pages, and this what we say uh, document root inside the binary itself. So in embedded, there are multiple web servers which you might not heard of, like Go Ahead is a web server, Boa is a web server. So these are some web servers which are used in a embedded operating system. And BusyBox HTTPD is also used as a web server. And in OpenWRT routers, there is a HTTPD from what we say light HTTPD web server. So they have a document route. You can perform a security check. And this is quite important, like find slash name dot sh and type file and permission 777. So if you found this file and you are a normal user, and let's say this file you found as a cron job, you can put a additional command inside it, like add user, and when that cron job get executed, your user will add it as a root user, right? So you can basically perform a privilege escalation with 777 executable files, or you can also execute those files by modifying and adding commands. So always be careful when giving 777 permission to any file. Okay. Now, what more you can look apart from this? This is like a standard Linux document. In device, you should look for the tr069.conf. That contains the tr069 configuration, where you may find a path to the private key file. With that private, if the CA pinning is unable, you can use that private key file to connect with the ACS server. You can check for the SQLite DB. In this device, there are very small databases which maintains the user access to the web UI. So you can look for the SQLite DB. Also, you can look, as I told you here, shell script. Also you have to look for all the binaries which are non-standard, like if you google the name of that binary, it appearing, you can check for the security of that binary, like libcurl is the most common library and binary is used inside the device. For example, dns mask is the most common and widely used binary in the device. So you can check the firmware version of DNS mask, you can check the firmware version of libcurl, and you can search online for the attack associated with this binary. So like Google have recently discovered 7 major flaws in the DNS mask which allows a memory leak, and from memory leak you can execute the command. So it was a remote code execution on IoT devices using DNS mask binary. Also, you can search for the hard-coded MD5 hard-coded MD5 hashes, which you can later decode to obtain a password. Also, you can search SSL-related file, certificates, database-related files, and binary files, which you can later reverse and identify a critical aspects or critical vulnerabilities of this. So generally what happened here, there are I have a market download firmware which I used to share with the public and generally give this as a task. So if you are interested, you can take this as a task after this training and you can solve this. This is a firmware analysis slide 4. Okay, so here you have to identify what web server is running inside the device. Here you have to identify the password. So this is a kind of hands-on. You have to find the upgrade ways. You have to find the ways to upgrade the device, and you have to find the employee of the company. You can write this. You can write the answer of this talk. You can write the answer of this on comment section. If DEFCON Red Team Village allows, then, or you can answer. You can write the answer of this on Discord server. Okay. Now getting hands dirty. So if you remember at the beginning of talk, we are talking about how this decent looking IP phone will turn into a botnet, right? So getting hands dirty is like here we are going to set up, we are going to start a dynamic testing of the device as we gathered too many data from this firmware analysis section. Now we have to use this data for our next section, right? So that is dynamic testing section. So you can identify all the web application entry points using firmware analysis. You can identify all the CGI pages or CGI action or the parameter which is used in the device from the firmware analysis. So you don't need to perform a major task, that is content discovery for the device security. As with the firmware, we get all of the details most of the time. Okay. So if there is a if you are good with the Linux, then you can run a init tab file, and from init tab file you may identify what are the aspects that are getting called, what are the services that are getting started inside the device. So this kind of stuff you can identify from the firmware itself. Now it's time to connect. Now it's time to get your hands dirty with device testing. So if you remember, in initial setup, I asked you that we may need a additional LAN card. So if you have a router, then it's fine. If you don't have a router, you may use one LAN card as a DHCP server in your Linux box. Okay, setting up DHCP server in Linux is quite easy. So first thing is we have to identify the way to connect an IP phone. So when I got this assignment for the first time, I was like, what to look inside it, right? This is just IP phone. Like, I have to make a call. What is the security that we are going to take care? Then later after thinking for a while, I got that this device have a IP address, and as we read the document, we come to know that web interface is there. So I got a charm and I started testing. So I set up a DHCP server on my Linux laptop and connect one end to the router, one end to the device IP phone, and I got one lease for my laptop. Okay, and then uh, as this got IP address, I was able to ping that device and I run a full port scan on the device. As discussed, that nmap should be run as a full port scan on device, because you don't know what surprise it can give you. So here is the port scan result for this. So I'll zoom it into it. So here I have started the nmap ping not scan with a full port scan and aggressive. This was a this was a IP address of IP phone, and output all the files as a IP phone demo with a T4. So this was a flag I used. Here you can see I found one telnet port open on this. Here it is saying save soft alchemy from the telnet D. Okay, and the 53 port was filtered here on TCP. So later I come to know that 53 was the UDP DNS UDP port of DNS mask. It was open on DNS mask UDP, and 80 port was open. So that means the HTTP service is running there, and 443 was open. So SSL was running there. And apart from this, more interesting stuff I found here, that this device is running Linux 2.6.x. More precisely, uh, here is the takeaway from nmap output. That you remember we had a document review and we found that username for admin is admin, and just gave a wild guess try for the password, that admin, and boom, what we got? Uname hyphen Linux 2.6.36 and UID 0, that is root shell. So with the one shot, with the one nmap, with the one simple nmap command, I was able to get the root over this device with the default root scan. But here is the point, that we are researchers, we are not a hacker. So we need to secure device from hackers. So we need to make a device hacker proof. Okay. Then once I got the root, I added a backdoor for it for making my access persistent there. But I started again the testing. So we found that web server is 82443. We found one more port 7547. Here is the port. It is open and unknown to nmap, and 53 was filter, and OS guess what nmap gives here is it should be between 2.6.17 to 2.6.36, and here we get a exact version 2.6.36 kernel, and it's a MIPS kernel. Okay, so if you search for this version 2.6.36, Linux kernel exploit, you will end up with at least 4 to 5 pages on CV database, right? There could be a privilege escalation website exploit, there could be a remote code execution website, or there could be a many exploits could be there, right? So as you can see how poorly this device is configured, right? Now setting up a web interception for this device. Obviously, the first step when we get a web interface as a security researcher or as a hacker, the first thing what we do is add a burp. So this was IP phone. I added a burp suit here, and this burp suit was in between my laptop. So sometimes there is a trick, like sometimes device don't support a proxy connection. Like if there is a proxy, it will drop immediately. So what you can do is like you can add a add switch proxy or as a proxy kind of plugin with which you can immediately switch from one proxy to other proxy, and then you get first normal communication working and suddenly turn on the proxy so that you can capture the request. I don't know what is the exact reason for this, but this works most of the time. So if the device is not getting connected or it's not sharing the proxy, then I used to use this trick. Now, once you set up everything, interception, and first thing you are going to do is log in here with the admin and admin. Here you can see the request is going with admin, and this request looks pretty plain. Go form / webs login interface is getting called, and uh, here is the redirect that this is redirecting to status basic.asp. So this will be take you towards dashboard, and as an admin you hack the device now. Okay, and after browsing for a while, I got one request, set system administration with a go form. So go ahead is a web server which I asked you to identify. Okay, sorry, don't you think something is missing here? Those who have attended the brief talk may know this. Those who have not attended, the X-frame option is missing here. So as X-frame option is missing, that means you can do a click jacking with this device. And here you can see with this request, you can configure every aspect of this device. Like user type is admin, admin username is admin password is admin, and remote web login support is disabled. Oh, they have disabled the remote web login. Wireless web access is 0. So if you are connected to Wi-Fi, also you can access the web port. LAN web port is 80. DBID web port is 80. DBID web SSL port is 443. Web timeout is 5. Web remote legal IP is 0.0.0.0. So one side is saying that you should not be able to access a wireless, you should not be able to access a web interface on wireless, and oh, it's enabled, sorry. And web interface can web remote legal IP is 0.0.0. So anyone on the network can access the web interface of this device. Also, here you can see telnet remote legal IP. So anyone from the world can telnet to this device, as there is no blacklisting done on the device. So radius shared secret is not present here, or radius vendor ID, radius vendor access level is not mentioned. Here is the malicious thing, cn.pool.ntp.org. So this device is communicating to the Chinese NTP server and taking time from there, right? So what you can so here in this one request you can configure everything, but what is missing here, this request don't have any uniqueness, right? This is a web parameters, this is a cookie, and this is a standard data which flows around. So there is a no cross-site no nonce is present here, which means this is vulnerable for request forgery. So make a note of it. This device is vulnerable for click jacking, this device is vulnerable for request forgery. Now, while browsing, make a note, just make a note of this. To interact at the system level of a device using web interface, there are most of the two common ways are there. One is the diagnostic page. With a diagnostic page here in management page or firmware upgrade page, or this is a diagnostic tab is selected here. This diagnostic page is provided to ensure the connectivity, to capture the packets, or to trace the route, whether device is connected to proper end or not. But what they do is, like, they take the IP address from here, pass it to the system call. System call calls the ping and make a ping request to the address and print the data here only. So instead of IP address, I give a output of here I give a input as a backtick ID, and it says bad address, but it executed the command and gives me the UID of device. So code execution, web interface is accessible remotely. That means it's a remote code execution vulnerability we have in this device. With this, you can get a root easily. Easily you can get a root. All you need to type here is Ncap and LVP and your port like 1337. Once you enter that port, you are good to go. You got a remote code execution on the device, right? So the second way is to look into the backup file. Click on backup file. If that backup file is plain, you are able to see more parameters than a web interface into that backup file. Let's say telnet enable or disable, SSH enable or disable, or some other ways, some other parameters which are not listed in web portal. You can see it in a backup file. So you modify that backup file and upload it back to the device, and your telnet may get start up and running. SSH may get start up and running. So there are many configurations. So that is the second way through which you can interact with a device. Means device core operating system, underlying operating system from the device web UI. Okay, and as device keeps coming, you may find more. These interfaces are generally vulnerable for cross-site scripting kind of vulnerabilities. I found one SQL injection also, LFI also. So OWASP top 10 is also applicable for performing this. So now we have a UI readdressing, we have a CSRF, we have shell command injection. All you need to make one fancy page, add a payload of command execution, and just host it to somewhere and share that link to a corporate guys. Once they click on that link, it creates a it forms a clickjacking attack. With that clickjacking attack, it will contact to your local IP phone, log in with a default credential, and execute a command, CSRF command, to the device. Here is the POC which I have created for this attack. We have updated the policy of organization. Kindly click on I agree for accepting the terms. Once you click on I agree, it executes the command on the device. So this is how a simple looking IP phone can turn into a botnet. So hopefully you might like this attack. Now I think this is undocumented here. So once you got the shell, now what? As I told you, we are a security researcher and we are not a hacker. So we have to make the device completely unhackable, right? That is our target is. People may say security is a myth, but only we know that how much we are putting effort. Like everyone is working on network security, application security, and cloud security, and they are trying their best to keep their uh, security service super secret, like super secured, right? So once you, by exploiting this web service, you may obtain a root here like Ncap and LVP 1337 or telnet D hyphen P 1337. So you get access to the device. Now you have to perform some internal testing. Please note that this section was not covered in the brief. So first thing, like, we have to do a full device compromise. You got a code execution. With that, you can get a reverse or bind shell of the device. Also, you can write a data inside the RC script, to maintain the access. Like every time, let's say device got rebooted, so still you need your shell. So you can write telnet d-p137 in rc.local file. So once the init process is complete, you can your access will still be persistent. Or you can write a IP table rule, like IP table in input chain, write accept like this action bin busybox telnet d hyphen l bin /sh on port this. Or you can write your init script. And lastly, you can flash the malicious firmware, through which you will get a full device compromise. As like access should be a persistent to the device to perform further testing. Once you got a full device access, what you should look inside the device, you should look for the vulnerable components installed inside the device. Like as you are just a second. So sorry. Then you should look for the vulnerable component like etc shadow, g shadow. You should look, and here are then you should look for the vulnerable libraries. What libraries? Like libexpart, libeuclipc, then libcurl, libopenssl. Some devices are using libssl from 2006 package. Like it's already outdated, right? Some expert library was there, and like many libraries which are used in device are not always updated. So you should look for that command. And also you should look for the software installed. Like if like for Red Hat we use RPM, Debian we use dpkg, and for Android we look for the pmlist packages. So unnecessary, like if you are using a setup box at your home, and if the messaging app is installed, then there is a no use of messaging app, right? Someone may and if that messaging app, I think it's a broadcaster or something, like you can trigger with malicious app, you can pop up a sms inbox, sms, you can demonstrate the sms inside the stb, which may lead to a further financial fraud. And you can look for the app in system apps or preview apps or vendor apps. Then you can look for the core vulnerable software, like if there is java installed, so what version of java is in use, what version of php is in use. Then you should take a dump which version of openssl is in use. And uh, you should take a dump of apache 2 or light httpd document root. And you should check for the smbd configurations. Also, with these are the four aspects which you should ensure in system internal testing. Like what is the OS config? You can get it with uname-a. You can see what are the modules are listed. You can see what are the file system are supported. You can see what CPU it is in use, what memory that device is using, and you can see what are the USB with LS USB. You can see what are the so with LS PCI you can see what are the PCI modules that are connected to that device. So you to identify the vulnerable component, or to identify the vulnerable function of the device. And you can ensure the OS security with whether SE Linux is what is the status of SE Linux in environment. Is there any vulnerability out there, or any hard-coded configurations are there? You can list out the sysctl parameters. You can check for the aliases. And lastly, our favorite cron term. Cron plays major role in devices. Like you may most of the time I am able to successfully I'm able to successfully escalate privilege with the cron tab. And then you can identify the what are the vulnerable network function or network component with how many interface are there in device. Like some device may have 8 interface, 16 interface. In enterprise grade device you may find a 16 or 32 LAN interfaces. Then what are the service which are listening? and SNMP is there, or Nagios is there, or HTTP is there, HTTPD is there, and here is I found some user local custom Apache. So that Apache was customized with a module, and Nginx is running over there. You can check for the network component, like what are the interfaces are there, wireless interfaces, wireless list of wireless interfaces, what are the IP address that device have, what are the bridges that is listed there, what are the route it is following, and IPv6 route. So you should dump this information and keep it stored somewhere, like device important information. Now you got all this data inside one file, right? This all data, this all data, and this all data. Now the challenge is how to transfer a data from device to your computer. So the easiest way is to use a netcat. So like you start a NC listener on device with inputting that file, and then transfer it to the then connect your laptop with that port on using NC. You will get all the data. Second way is to download a data from world to device. We can use a wget if wget is supported or curl is supported. And once we obtain the binary, let's say what these guys do is like they disable a listener mode in busybox in netcat of busybox to secure to prevent a data leak from the device. So in that case we have to install our own busybox, and we can transfer the data with netcat by installing our own customized netcat, our own standard netcat. Basically the customized netcat is used by the device vendor to prevent a data leak. Then you can transfer the, if there is a SD card functionality, then you can connect a SD card. With SD card you can transfer the data. With ADB push pull you can extract or push data inside the device. And in this next example we are going to use some proprietary commands like ftp get and ftp put. So I'm going to show you some proprietary commands. Like you have to perform a command analysis, that which command will possibly help you for taking the archive out or pushing the data inside the device. Okay, and the permission obvious. I don't always review a cron tab, but when I do, it's on production server. I don't always chmod, but when I do, it's chmod 777. So cron job plus chmod 777 is the deadliest combination. You can achieve a privilege escalation. Let's say cron job is in device. Cron job is running for process monitoring purpose, uh, for upgradation purpose, for running log rotation purpose. So many cron jobs are there in a device. So what you can do, you and poorly configuration permission with a cron job. Like a cron job file is running, let's say cache clear.sh is a script file which is running with a 777 with as a root cron job. So what you have to do, you have to do a add user x or add user hacker. You have to add that command inside this, and then your user will get added. Or you can execute any command with a root user, and also you can make a persistent access with this. Like you can write a IP tables rule there, or you can write a nc-lvp. So at particular time when this cron job will get executed, your backdoor will be open, right? So in system in internal testing we can test this aspect also. Hopefully you like this section. And now at last we are going to touch base our last section of the talk, that is fuzzing, reverse engineering and exploit development. And now grab your espresso, because cappuccino is not going to help you. You need more caffeine and more coffee. We are going to touch the last section of the training, that is fuzzing, reverse engineering and exploit development. So this is gonna take I think 1 more hour, and this is the last section. Now as till now we perform a firmware analysis, we found the ways to get a root, we perform system internal testing. So we have secured our device too much, like, and now we have to secure a device from zero day attacks. that is memory corruption vulnerabilities like stack overflow, heap overflow, those kind of bugs like memory corruption bugs. So for that, we need a espresso first, and once we had espresso, we are good to go. So first thing before starting this section is we must have a root with us. Why we need a root, or why we need a shell? So the first of that you will come to know in the next few slides. The first thing is getting the root is the most important part of this testing. And as I told you that we are a researcher, we are not a hacker. We have to make a device 100% secure from hacking. So for that we have to do a fuzzing on every entry point of device. So in this section we are going to cover HTTP fuzzing. Those who have attended brief can connect to .now, and those who have not attended the brief can understand this very can start understanding this very thoroughly. Okay, now first thing is to getting the root, and the ways to getting root as discussed is like exploiting web vulnerabilities. Like with exploiting a web vulnerabilities, you can get a root shell. Second, you can perform a firmware analysis. You may come up with a backdoor account or some hidden services or hidden ways to connect the device with a shell. You can perform a document review. Some vendors neatly document a debugging process of their device. So how to enable a debug mode. Then default credentials like always work. We got a root by telnetting just binary with admin. And lastly, the reverse engineering section. So just for an information, this device is not the same IP phone which we used earlier. This is a GPON device. The advisory for this device has been already published with prior information and proper disclosure policy, responsible disclosure. Okay, so let's get started. Upon looking index2.asp file, we come up with following interested code. So this is a firmware I extracted, and this here I see that if request form username should be tc web api get account entry 1 and username and h. Then else if request from username tc web api get account entry 0 and username. Then if username value is account entry 1, username should be string, this string. Okay, so it's quite obvious that tc web api is the interface which is interacting with the database of a device. So quite sure about the logic that there is something called TC API binary who is responsible for accounting, like admin account, telnet account, SSH account, kind of. So we double confirm the same using SSH file. So TC Web API set account entry is commit flag, e-commit flag. TC Web API get web user custom entry, and here also you will see TC Web API SSH entry active. So we from this code we can guess no, we are sure that SSH user is also accountable via TC Web API. Then I spend a lot of so first I spend a lot of time on document root, that how this account is getting authenticated, and then I come to this index.asp basic login page, and from there I get TC Web API, and also I checked for the TC Web API for SSH, and here I come to know that SSH entry is something. If the SSH is active, then it is writing asp.write checked, and means to for SSH account also TC Web API is responsible, and for web account also TC Web API is responsible. After spending countless hours on reversing TC Web API, I found the interesting stuff. So here you will see the strings. This is a RUD array2 interface, and this is disassembly. This is the function available inside the RUD array. These are the symbols, and I found that SSH entry active in rom file.cfg. So when I do this cat rom file.cfg and grep for SSH, here I found that SSH entry active is yes, and SSH username is admin, and SSH password is, obviously this is modified, fuzzy demo. So you will find this is a console password, string.console password length is 15, console account password is equal to 21, and here you will find SSH web entry also. Account username, web password, console password, auth mode, and somewhere here is a call of SSH. I'm not able to get it right now. Okay, forget it. So after spending countless time on reversing this binary, I found that SSH entry is active in room file.configuration. So when upon looking for the room file.config, I found the SSH entry active yes, and SSH username is admin, and SSH password was there in a plain text. Now, first thing after getting is to log in the device and check for the environment and PS. So I did SSH to the box this on this particular Skyver ONT GPON. So the algorithm was Defi Hellman Group 1 SHA supported, and I logged into device and I see the processors. So this is the list of processors. Here you can see at the PID 381 the BOA server is running. Then I check for some and now after logging to device, I have seen for the commands what are the supported. So here you can see when I run a command busybox, there are only this many options are available: cp cut, hostname, init, IP kill. But if you closely observe this, there is a no way that netstat is there, and that netstat was not on listener mode. So I found one interesting command here called ftpget, and after running that ftpget command, I found the option of this command was remote host, local file, remote file. So basically we can get the file by typing the remote host here and the local file name and remote file name. So I went to the TMP, which was writable. I did get FTP get, and this was my server where I hosted a FTP server, and I download the busybox for MIPS directory. And mkdir cannot create a bin file exist. Okay, so I think busybox was there already, and then I created a folder called busybox. Bin folder here, and it was already present, that's why it pop up error. And then I installed the busybox here with busybox -- install, and source folder is /bin, and then I run busybox, see the commands available with us now. This is the power of busybox. As you can see here, a list of commands very low, and here you can see all commands are supported by our busybox binary. So busybox binary can be downloaded anywhere. So this is the content of busybox. This is the content of /tmp, and now we have everything. Like this is we set up our environment first for getting things ready. Now after getting our own custom busybox with all functionality of Linux available, we will move towards next thing, that is making device fuzzable. Okay, so by default some settings are not applicable, hence we have to make this device fuzzable. So here you can see the first thing I did is enable a core dump. So core dump is disabled in most of the thing. So here I did echo-n/tmp/core.p, that is process, and enable it into proxies kernel core pattern. So core I set core pattern is core.pid. Then I set up a ulimit, what is maximum possible. Once you did this, once you enable a core dump, you have to restart a web server. So here I saw the web server, I get it ps-aux pipegrep boa. So it is not supporting U option. So again I did ps-grep boa, and I found that boa was running at ps PID 381. Then I killed that PID and restarted that PID with the argument which was listed on the PS. Okay, so this is a boa binary location. This is a ch root, and I'm starting this as a daemon mode. Okay, and now our device is ready for fuzzing. Once the device is ready for fuzzing, we have to start the fuzzing. So this is a HTTP fuzzing. For fuzzing, we have to make sure that we are going to fuzz each and every request with each and every parameter, because you never know which at what level you are going to get what surprise. So here is the first page, that is admin login. I clicked on login, and one more thing, if you fuzz the pre-login pages, that is unauthenticated pages, there is a very chance of getting unauthenticated RCs, and obviously we know that unauthenticated RCs make more impact than authenticated ones. So as here you can see, I logged in with the credential, then I send this request to intruder, and I said I selected all parameters here, and this is my fuzz list, where there is a 1, 2A, 5A, 10A up to 50 lakhs, 50 billion A. Okay, so this is my fuzz list. I loaded into a burp suite here and fired the request. As you can see, your fuzzing going well, 28 handles, 58 handles, 208 handles, 508 handles. Here you can see there is a no response from server. And then suddenly we got a response here, and fuzzing is finished. Now let's look at what happened here. Here you can see that at BOA, server was started at PID 1169 on port 80. Here you got extra read in write body, read length is -1, and here you got see something got 6 sub, and dumping core in /tmp as we enable core dump in tmp. Okay, again, now you are wondering, if server is crashed, then how it got up again. So in these devices, these processes like web application, SSH, these processes are monitored continuously. So why these processes are get monitored continuously? To ensure the product is up and running. So this procman again start the binary, as our fuzzing was there, it again crashed the binary. Again it started the binary, again we crashed it the binary. But here you might be seeing that if this can handle 10,000 A, right? If it is crashing at 10,000 A, why it gives you a 200 response again? So that's the magic. That we are going to identify in the next step. As you can see here again, you have to create a pattern for this. So we have to identify at what parameter it was getting crashed. So like if you send a 50,008 to the password one, server was not crashing. If you send a 50,000 A at password 2, servers were not crashing. And finally, I was able to identify that this password parameter is vulnerable, and it is crashing with a 5,000 A. Here you can see, right? Then obviously the first our next step is create a pattern with Metasploit to identify what are the offsets are in use, at what level it is getting crashed. But is it so easy? Like in Windows, you connect, you attach the process to WinDGP. But what about this? How you are going to do it here? So here you can see target remote. That means I am connecting somewhere. Oh, wrong screenshot. So the next step is, as we have identified the architecture of device is MIPS BE, that is MIPS Big Endian. We have to find out the GDB server. As you cannot install a debugger most of the time because lack of space, so what we do, we install a server inside the device and we connect with our debugger client using GDB remote command. Okay, so now as we have installed our busybox, we can use now wget. We don't need to do ftp get, and I hosted this GDB server binary at my server. I downloaded it, I changed that name of binary, and I started a boa here. And post starting the boa, I attach that boa server process to the GDB server. Here you can see there must be a PID. The boa server started with PID 1356. Then I started a GDB server here and I attached the process 1356, and the GDB server was started on port 1337 with IP address 192.168.1.1. It is a device IP. And the client side, we have to install a GDB multi-arc. You may use J for GDB PEDA also. I like Pon GDB. So I ran a Pon GDB here and I started GDB multi-arc. As soon as I started GDB multi-arc, I can see I can connect to this process here somewhere, target remote IP address and port. It connects me to this process of BOA. So we have set up our debugging communication, and here you can see the registers of device. So these are the current value of S0, S2, S3, S4, and T4, T5, T6, T7, and all the registers values are here. Now, as we have started everything, as we have set up everything, again we have to trigger those cache. Here you can see the easiest way to get easily highlighted what are the registers and control. I use A, like X41 we know. Here I fired the crash again after debugging, and once the crash occurs here, here somewhere, ASP handler mod port XOR read in body, that means it got 6 and as you can see here, attach the process 1363. So earlier when I started debugging this device, the PID was 80. And now you can see 1363. So how many times we have to debug this device? So it's you require lots of patience to perform this operation, but yes, it's satisfactory, it's worth. So here we got a SIG bus and here we got a SIG serve, and if you see here you can see A here, here also AA, here also AA, and return address PC is also AA. So that means it's easy to identify that form register S0 to S3 we can control, form register T4, T7 we can control, and also we can control a return address. Now for anyone from Pon team here, this is easy stuff for them, right? Now you know what to do. So, but where, like we send lots of it, but at what level it is getting? So again we have to attach the process, and once process is attached, we have to continue SIG pipe here, and we have created a Metasploit payload of Metasploit pattern of 5000 here, 5000 A means length 5000, and we fired that as a password parameter, and you can see here is the data 393349. So now we have random. Now we have to get those offsets. So after querying all the offsets, I found the exact match from first match I found at 1000, that could be our T4 registers. Second I found at 1004, that is our T7 register, and then here we found a sequentially 32, 28, 32, 36, and 40, 444 bytes each. That is our register from S0 to S3. These 4 registers. So basically, what we can do is we can put some data here on 1000 to 1004 if required, or we can load ROP gadgets here from this address, or we can host our shell code here from S0 to S3, and we can call at our return address, that is 1044. So if we call the S0 address where the shell code is hosted at 1044, it could be a RC. Hope you guys enjoy this session, and this is my exploit, okay, and this is my exploit code. So after debugging a lot, I was able to identify exact offsets. So this is a simple request, and this exploit is written in Python. Simply, it is available online also. So this is password 1 XSS, password 2 XSS, login type user, and password. And password is here we are giving A2999. As you remember, we got a first matching offset at 1000 register. Then I sent here a T4 data, and then T7 data here, and then we have to give some padding. Here I give a padding till T6, so we have control over T6 register also, so T4, T6, T7 here, and then I given a padding of k into 8 bit padding here for S0, S0, S1, S1, S2, S3, S2 and S3, S3 register, and then again some padding for calling our return address. So if you see here, these values, this is S0, S0, S1, S1, S2, S2, S3, S3, and here T7, T7, T6, T6, T4, T4. Okay, so we are able to successfully compromise this device. Now building an exploit code based on this is quite easy task. Hope you have enjoyed this section, and thanks a lot. I'm always available with you for question answer. Still you have a question answer, you can ping me or you can contact me at securitybeast, or you can mail me at kingkostov@me.com. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, DEFCON Red Team Village, for giving me an opportunity to share my knowledge. Thanks a lot.